Good evening. We're here to do one thing, and that's to obsess about Napoleon. Okay. So today we gave one of our beautiful bracelets. We would love to find out who got it. The picture is on the blog. And this is one of our important days on the project because this is the birthday of Hortense de Beauharnais Bonaparte, who was Napoleon's stepdaughter. And she is a very important figure in this project. And I always talk about her. And I put a link with all of the videos that I put up of the readings that I'm doing, where you can hear her memoirs in French and English. And I did get them in German, so I'm planning on reading them in German too. And I did put a lot of the German online also until a cyclone came through my project in January. And it's under new management now. So we're really excited about it. We like the new management. And in addition to the other jewelry news, I made my new necklace, which is a real Napoleon III coin. It says Empire Française. So we want that French Empire back. We want the third rise of the Bonapartes. I've always said that I want that. And we can make that happen. It was a good dynasty. And 2 times they stopped us twice. And that's the truth. And it was English gold. Okay? And they bribe everybody. And that's how they get away with everything, because they bribe the people who are important. And the only people who get to be important are the people that they can bribe. So it becomes like a ruling class of criminals. And the good people get relegated to the sidelines. And that's why we live in this environment that is so degenerate, and where basically good people have to run and hide from a malevolent structure of government, education, medicine. Everything is influenced by this malevolence. And hopefully we can fight for a system with integrity. And we have to fight for that, because that's our lives, you know. Anyway, so let's get back to the memoirs of Count Charles Tristan de Montsolon. This is someone who poisoned Napoleon. And in these memoirs, we see how pleasing he was, how he knew how to say all the right things. So he is the prototypical handler, plant, agent. Basically, he's a gun for hire who will do anything for money as long as he can continue to be a wealthy aristocrat. At this point, we don't know what happens to him later on, but we know that he poisoned Napoleon because there was a pattern of poisoning in his hair. And, you know, the agents came in and they tried to throw sand in our eyes and trick us that we couldn't know the truth about it. But it was proven. These things can be proven. When someone's poisoned, it's in their hair. And it had to be Montsolon, just by circumstances. And it's an uncontested fact that Napoleon had his will changed to Montsolon's favor right before he died. So that's a perfect indication that Montsolon was motivated by money. And Napoleon was so worn down by then. He had been tortured for years. And it's so sad to see the effect that this had on Napoleon. They did wear him down, and he was such a great man. But his digestive system was slowly being destroyed, and he was tortured basically to death. And he was still Napoleon, but he lost his fight, and he didn't have support anymore. All he had was this best friend who was actually poisoning him, and he had his valet de chambre, and he had who did love him, and Bertrand, who was his grand marshal, who was faithful to him, but his wife was constantly crying to leave, and she was having one miscarriage after another. He was having a horrible, horrible time in St. Helena. So it was very easy for Monson to drive a wedge between Napoleon and Bertrand. So it was really only down to Monson and Marchand, his valet de chambre. And I believe his Napoleon's valet understood that Monson was up to something. But what could he say? This was Napoleon's best friend at the end. This was the last faithful person, so it seemed. But he was treated differently by the English officials. So you do have a real indication that they know what he's there for. Okay, so let's continue. And I always recommend that people look up The Truth About the Monsons, which was on my blog, where you see how different he is in the letters that he wrote to his wife and how he can't really keep his story straight. He's definitely telling her to be sneaky and to be careful what she says because Napoleon is going to want to read those letters. Napoleon, if there was a letter around Napoleon, he was going to want to read it. Okay, so it was a characteristic of Napoleon. He wanted to read all letters. It's a very quirky, kind of cute thing about him. But he's saying to his wife, Albany, he's like, you better watch out because he's going to want to read it. So they were sneaking around for sure. And it's a different personality than we're seeing in this memoir. You're seeing a public face Monson, but you're seeing how smooth he was. And he is telling the truth. But sometimes that's the best way to trick people is by telling the truth. Okay, so let's continue. By one of those contradictions common enough in politics, although happily tolerably rare in our social relations, whilst on the one hand we were the objects of civility and attention from the society of the island, we heard every day of the adoption of some new measure of general surveillance, the result of which was to restrict the liberty we had enjoyed since our landing. At one time, it was an officer said to be a guard of honor, but in reality, a spy who had been placed in a barrack 100 meters from the pavilion of the emperor. At another, a telegraphic signal, by means of which everything that went on at Briars was immediately reported in the town. At another time, sergeants were given to us to serve as guides. In a word, we were so well attended to that we could not proceed a step without being accompanied by a pretended guide. And the emperor never set foot out of his room without the admiral being informed of all his motions. This state of things could have no other termination than that of totally altering our relation to the admiral, whatever pains he took to disguise the marks of surveillance which he caused to be carried on. At last, countless causes received directions to address a note to the admiral protesting against measures which the situation of St. Helena rendered uselessly harassing, and the Grand Marshal was commissioned to convey it to the Admiral and to discuss its contents with him. But whether it was that he did not entirely coincide with the opinion of the compiler of the note, or from some other reason, he did not wish to deliver it and did not fulfill his mission. A fortnight passed before the Emperor heard anything said about it, and it was to his great astonishment that he learned from the mouth of the Grand Marshal that nothing had been said or done. The Emperor's displeasure was visible, but he suppressed it with some difficulty through friendship for Bertrand and said to him, "You're not delivering the note if you were dissatisfied with its tenor, or if you regarded it as dictated by an impulse of anger, was proof of your devotion to my interests. But this should only have been a delay of some hours. After this delay, you ought to have spoken to me on the subject. you will know that I should have listened to you with attention and should have agreed with your opinions if you had proved to me that you were in the right. But to delay a fortnight without telling me that you not executed the mission with which I charged you is inexplicable. What have you to reply? Grand Marshal only answered by the respectful assurance that he thought he had done well in not delivering the note, which he disliked, both as to its composition and its intention. Emperor replied, "You are perhaps right, Bertrand. They have condemned us. This is the anguish of death. They unceasingly join outrage to injustice. What useless fixations! If I was so annoying to them, why did they not kill me? A ball through my heart or my head would have sufficed, and there would at least be some courage in the crime." Pauline says this throughout his time at St. Helena, that they should have shot him, and the way they're killing him is a very cowardly way to kill him. He says that the whole time that they were a bunch of cowards for doing it this way, because he knows the whole plan is to isolate him, vilify him, and then slowly kill him and then lie about it. He knows exactly what they're doing. He's not exactly sure how they're going to do it, but he knows what they're going to do, and he was right, 100% right. And also, all the surveillance was for their own good, right? Okay, so when you're dealing with English Gold and their agents, they're going to come and bring you blankets and tell you how much they love you while they suffocate you. It's always for your own good because they care so much about you. It's always in your best interests. That to me is almost like the defining quality of how they operate. It's always like, oh, we're such good people, care so much about you. Never did we see that more than during the early months of 2020. It was all for our own good because they care so much about us. I can't stand it anymore when the publicists on the television screens all tell us how much they care about us. I know exactly how much they care about us. Okay. They have shown throughout my entire life how much they care about us. Okay. And I will say this every single day regarding how much the people on the TV screens care about us. Okay. At 9/11, 3 buildings went down and they were full of explosives. And we were told a very interesting story that was not congruent with those buildings being full of explosives. It is an uncontested fact from every direction that those buildings were full of explosives. So then we have to look at who was controlling those buildings. Oh, turns out he made billions in insurance money. Why did they pay him billions in insurance money when those buildings were full of explosives? That's illegal, right? When you take out insurance and then destroy the building and then you want to claim the money, uh, it's arson or whatever. It's insurance fraud. So how did he get that money? He must have had extremely wealthy, important, powerful, above the law people behind him to collect on that insurance. Can you imagine if you were the insurance company and you looked into that and you saw that the person took out all this insurance, controlled the building, filled the buildings up with explosives somehow, and we know exactly who did it. I put it on the blog all of the time. Look it up. The art students, okay? It's always some art gallery, art students, always something like a charity. They always put the most benign mask on what they do. Okay, so there's all these art students. And then this is like obvious, even in books about the art project they were doing in the World Trade Center, even in the New York Times, you can see the walls are covered in fuses because I'm not going to say what they were doing, but I will say that those buildings were full of explosives. And there's no question. You can watch those buildings go down. They're controlled demolitions. Okay, fine. It's no question this is what happened. And yet, did the media ever say, "Oh, by the way, we were wrong. We were mistaken in what we all told you"? No, not at all. To this day, You're crazy if you don't believe them. They will tell you any story. That is all you need to know about how much they care about you, okay? Did w Were a lot of the people deceived, or they didn't realize that they were being tricked into, relaying a story that wasn't true? I'm sure that that is the case, but the people who run things know very well what was going on, and they could have warned us, and then 20 years later, we could have understood that there really is a huge conspiracy going on, because the news has been brought under the control of very few hands. And I was in media, and I was a journalist, and I worked in media. I had media jobs, and I could not stay in these media jobs because there was always a pretext why I had to leave the job. Why? Because I'm like this. That's why I couldn't stay in media, and that's reality. I'm good at media, so you can't be honest and work in media and stay in it. You have to just shut up and do what you're told, or you will lose that job. Okay. So when the whole media gets together and tells you how much they care about you, that's how seriously I take it. Okay. Because they didn't let us know that we were being deceived about 9/11. And every single thing that's happening right now is a direct consequence of them getting away with 9/11. If we had taken our own lives much more seriously and our future much more seriously, we would have demanded justice and gotten very serious about it. And because we didn't do that in 2001, 2002, we're in a much, much worse situation right now. And we have to do it now. We have to do it now. Or else you're going to kill us, because that's the plan. Me first, too. So if you want me to go, they're going to come for me first. That's the reality. And I've understood that, but I felt like, well, if they're going to make a move on all of us, then me first. So what? Because this is not an acceptable situation to me whatsoever. The way we're being treated, the way we're being lied to, it's wrong. Okay. Okay. Anyway, but I obviously I take this very seriously, and I have risked everything to do this, and it's worth it, because at least I can live with myself, and I don't know how some other people live with themselves. Okay, let's check out Las Casas in Italian. Hopefully, it's very heavy, but that's how I feel. All right, let's check out Italian. Hopefully, we can learn some Italian. Even if it is the end of the world, we can still learn Italian, right? Let's continue. Dopo questo caldo episodio, ritorno sulle disposizioni e sui particolari della campagna, fermandosi con competenza sul suo glorioso esordire e con angoscia sul terribile rovescio che aveva posto fine. Nulla di meno, e concludeva il caso, non parevami ancora disperato, ovvi avessi rinvenuto il soccorso che dovevo aspettarmi. Le ultime e le sole nostre risorse erano risposti nelle camere. Io corsi a Parigi per convincerli. Insorsero subito contro di me sotto colori che io mi recassi a dischiuderli. Quelli contro sesso, da quell'istante tutto fu perduto. Non è già, continuava l'imperatore, che intenda accusare tutti i membri delle Camere, ma tali è l'andamento inevitabile di quei corpi numerosi che debbano sempre perire per difetto di unione ad essi come egli eserciti bisognano buoni capi, se non che questi si eleggono, ma i grandi ingegni, gli ingegni eminenti si ne impadroniscono e li governano, noi, nel caso nostro, mancavamo di dai capi, onde che con tutte le migliori disposizioni, onde la maggioranza poteva essere risorretta, da quell'istante tutto fu confusione, vertigini, tumulto, la perfidia e la corruzione si piantarono alla soglia del corpo legislativo, l'incapacità, il disordine, il traviamento degli animi regnarono nel suo seno e per tal modo la Francia divenne preda del straniero. Ebbi per un istante la tentazione di resistergli e fui in quella di dichiararmi in permanenza alla Tuileries in mezzo ai miei ministri e al Consiglio di Stato. Aveva in animo di chiamarmi intorno i 6.000 uomini della guardia che tenevo in Parigi di rinforzarli col partito ben pensante della Guardia Nazionale, la quale era assai numerosa e di tutto i federati dei sobborghi, di aggiornare il corpo legislativo a Tours o da Blois, di ricomporre presso Parigi gli avanzi dell'esercito e di adotterarmi solo e in attitudini da dittatori alla salvezza della patria. Ma il corpo legislativo avrebbe esso obbedito? Avrei potuto considerarlo con la forza, ma quale scandalo! In allora, quale nuova complicazione! Il popolo avrebbe fatto cosa comune con me? L'esercito stesso sarà appesi sempre, attemperato ai miei geni, in quel continuo mutare di avvenimenti non sarà io stato forse abbandonato? Non sarà pesi per avventura tentato di conciliare gli interessi divergenti a tutto miscapito? L'idea che tanti fatichi e pericoli non avessero che mi progetto non servirebbe di plausibile pretesto. La facili accoglienze trovati l'anno preceduto presso i Borboni non sarebbero essi agiti per molte induzioni eccessive. Paul is talking about the legislative bodies. He was a dictator, but he did have legislative bodies that he did listen to. And the really interesting part is that he was so busy as dictator. I mean, he was emperor, but he was dictator. When he would bring ideas to the legislative bodies to improve things for the people, he had plants in there who would try to put the brakes on the wonderful plans he had. Instead of helping him, they would shut down the good things he was doing. So there really is a very malevolent force that was always like pushing in to stop Napoleon from doing the good that he wanted to do. He probably would have been better off without legislative bodies. And that's so paradoxical to what we're taught. Oh, democracy, democracy. But democracy is so wonderful for infiltrators because they can all, the doors are wide open if someone has money behind them, and they can fly right into the legislative bodies and they can change the laws. And that's how it works. So democracy is a wonderful system for puppetry from English Gold. And a strong leader who has the final word can enforce the law. And he can say, you can't do that here, get out. And a monarch can do that. See, they don't like monarchy and anything like that very much because that's someone who can say, no, get out. But democracy, they can always come right back in as long as they have all of that money behind them to fly right back in. So I want people to really think about that we're told that democracy is everything. It's so wonderful. We don't have a democracy at all. We have a show. And we actually have fascism behind a show of democracy. And they're always, oh, democracy and liberty and democracy and liberty. It's a perfect system for plants and infiltrators and agents. And if you want to run for office, you have to have millions and millions and millions. Where are you going to get those millions and millions? You know, how could a person like me ever run for office? I don't have them behind me. So I can never be in office. And that's democracy. So it's very interesting for us to reevaluate these magical words that we've been brainwashed into thinking about in a certain way. Democracy is wonderful, right? We don't have a democracy. We have a sham democracy. And we're supposed to love it. I think it's wonderful. And we're supposed to go and vote for the two people that were offered from the same exact group in England. I pointed this out last election. You could choose one Zionist named Biden, and you could choose another Zionist named Trump. And then when you look into Zionism, you find out what is behind that. So there's only one choice in the United States, this one group. And then where does that go back to? So, and then we're told we're terrible people if we don't vote, and we can't complain if we don't vote. Well, we can only choose one of two people from the same exact group in England. Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration. That's it. That's everything. Okay? And that's a wonderful place to explore the truth. The Balfour Declaration in 1917. And all the things that came out of the Balfour Declaration. And then you find out what's really going on. I know, it's heavy. It's heavy stuff, but we have to find it. You know, we have to get real. So now we're back to Lavalette hiding in the garret of the Department of Foreign Affairs. And they're going to bust him out. More aristocrats are going to help him. This is so inspiring. Because, as I said yesterday, the secret societies basically whipped up the French Revolution. We see that in all the memoirs, through propaganda, through fake populist movements, through girls, always girls. There's always sexy girls involved. That's one of English Gold's favorite techniques is sexy girls. So be aware of that. Yeah, they would even have sexy girls to do whatever, get everybody in the mood they wanted them in. And that is how they created this horrible disorder of the French Revolution. And then they trumped up all of these charges against aristocrats, and they just killed aristocrats. And why were they doing that? So they could take over because dead people can't defend anything. And that's what happened to Hortense de Beauharnais, Bonaparte's father. You know, it's her birthday today in 1783. And her father, Alexandre de Beauharnais, was a great French patriot. And he was a great general. And secret societies came in and engineered a situation where he was guillotined. And he would have been a great leader. And that's the point. The secret societies come in and then they kill the good people, they kill the leaders, and then they can just come right in and install their puppets and get their crimes going again. These are like dark occult criminal organizations at the top. The people at the bottom think it's a really fun club and they think they're networking, but the people at the top are, I have every indication, are really involved with what they call left-hand path, dark occult rituals, basically. And a lot of that is actually death rituals. So to kill all of these aristocrats, you can see the spirit behind it. It's like death rituals, I think. Certainly the way it happened. So all of this killing gets them power, the secret societies. You can see it's always like all this killing and then they take over. So there's a connection for them between killing and getting power. There's no question about that. Anyway, so the aristocrats were murdered in mass in the early 1790s. And they remember that this happened to them. And that's why they're helping Lavalette, because now they're doing the same thing to the Bonapartists. The same thing they did to the aristocrats, they're doing to the basically the populists. I can't really call Bonapartists populists. It's beyond that, because Napoleon was an aristocrat, but he wanted what was best for everybody. He was a uniter. It was not like a partisan thing. Bonapartists, they're not really aristocrats, but I guess more in the direction of populism. Anyway, so in 1815, they're killing the Bonapartists, and the aristocrats are feeling sympathy because now the secret societies, which have taken over again, on behalf of English gold, of course, it's hand in glove. Okay. Now they're killing the Bonapartists to terrorize the population. And it's so important to remember that Louis XVIII is not the sovereign leader of France. The people of France do not want him. He's being forced on these people. They want Napoleon. Okay, so they're doing all of these horrible things to terrorize the population into accepting a leader they don't want, who's really has no leadership skills whatsoever. He just, I don't want to insult him too much, but eating is his priority. It's very funny to say that, but it is. His priority is his meals. It's not the well-being of France whatsoever. And then 15 short years later, there's another revolution because the people were so unhappy, so dissatisfied. Things just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And then there's another revolution, and then France gets another puppet. And that's the subject of another book that I have gone into extensively on the blog, which was actually an Hortense de Beauharnais Bonaparte book about how her son was engineered into dying at 25 years old, I believe it was. And secret societies were involved. Isn't that interesting? Oh, and Montsalon's stepfather was big into secret society. It's always secret societies, and then right behind English gold. Whenever something truly horrible is happening, look that up yourself. Don't believe me. I've looked at these things from every direction. And that's what I always see. And anyone can see it. It's just that we have a whole system geared towards distracting you from seeing these things that are so obvious. I am so controversial. I'm blacklisted. I'm so dangerous only because I say things that are completely obvious. And that is not good. That the one person saying completely obvious things, and I'm not saying crazy things, I'm saying obvious things. And I'm so controversial. I'm so shocking. Okay? That's because everyone's either fooled or lying, except for me, at least on a screen. Okay? Because it does take, you do have to have a background in media to know how to make media. And most people who are not media don't know how to make media, but they do have opinions and they do have thoughts and they can perceive reality. But the people who are like media professionals who are trained in it tend to be in on it. And that's why I'm so shocking, because I do have training in media and I say all of these things that are completely obvious and that they know very well are true. But it's so shocking because they've been going along with it and they're scared that finally consequences are going to come their way, because you can't just exploit everyone forever and get away with it. At a certain point, you have to you have to understand it's time to stop exploiting people and to come clean, or else, because people do actually get caught when they do the wrong thing for too long. And I really have been trying to suggest we have reached that moment where it has become very dangerous to be predatory and exploitative. It's out now. We all see it. So I think the smart move is to start getting honest. And I think the people who do not heed that advice are going to be sorry later. Okay, so yesterday, Lavalette wanted some beer. And the man who owned the house said, "We don't drink beer here. We would love to give you some beer, but it might tip people off that someone different is here because there's eyes everywhere." Okay, so he's not going to get his beer. Let's continue. J'ai passé ma première nuit de liberté à me promener et à respirer près de la fenêtre entrouverte. Je ne pouvais plonger mes regards dans la rue du bac, mais j'entendais parfaitement et le fréquent passage des cavaliers me faisait tressaillir. Enfin, le matin, les fatigues l'emporta sur mes inquiétudes et je m'endormis. 2 heures après, je fus réveillé par les bruits qu'on faisait autour du roi et à mon grand étonnement, j'aperçus dans la chambre un petit homme qui arrangeait les meubles, balayé et frotté avec assez de précaution. Qui êtes-vous? M'écriai-je. Les valets de chambre dit monsieur. Mais il était convenu avec vos maîtres que personne n'entrerait chez moi. On a changé d'avis. Et si vous voulez vous lever, vous passerez dans ma chambre pendant que je mettrai tout en ordre ici. Je me levai donc, et il me fit entrer en face dans une autre pièce. Quand il fut parti, je me mis à considérer cette chambre beaucoup trop ornée pour celle d'un domestique, une cheminée ornée d'une pendule et des vases de fleurs, un lit élégant. J'ai m'avisé d'offrir un garde-robe à la tête du lit. J'ai vu des vêtements de femmes. Qui signifie tout ceci? Cet homme est donc marié, sa femme est donc instruite. Quoi? Déjà un enfant et 2 domestiques dans la confidence et dans cet hôtel. Tout cela est-il bien sage? Ces réflexions me troubleront à tel point que je me sentis le cœur défaillir. Je voulus me lever et j'ai tombé à mon hauteur, dans un évanouissement profond. Le domestique revint une demi-heure après, me trouvant en cet état, me traîna jusqu'à mon lit où il eut beaucoup de peine à me faire revenir. Tâchez de vous maintenir, car jusqu'à ce soir, monsieur ni madame ne pourront venir. J'arrive à entrer si je puis. Mais, au nom de Dieu, n'allez pas tomber malade, car comment vous faire visiter par un médecin? Je sentais bien vivement tout ce que me disait cet excellent homme. Et si j'allais mourir, pensais-je, que ferait-on-ils de mon cadavre? Je fus bientôt arraché à ces réflexions désolantes par les cris d'un colporteur qui proclamait dans la rue quelque chose que je n'entendais pas, mais où je crus que mon homme se trouvait mêlé. Je courus à la fenêtre, mais déjà l'homme était trop loin un peu que je pusse saisir un mot. Il fallut en attendre un autre, et j'ai passé 4 mortelles heures avant que ce conte se fit entendre. Cette fois, c'était une femme dont la voix claire et criarde fit arriver jusqu'à mon oreille les mots Lavalette, locataire, propriétaire. Ainsi, c'était une ordonnance, sans doute, et elle devait prononcer des punitions sévères contre ceux qui me donneraient en asile. Cela m'inquiétait peu, mais aussi des récompenses peu révélateurs, et qui savait si parmi les domestiques de la maison, il ne s'en trouverait pas une qui les pas du gain pousserait à me lancer. J'étais bien juste car André Journaux et sa femme, qui l'on appelait Monté, étaient d'anciens domestiques de la maison, d'une fidélité et d'un dévouement à toute preuve. La femme, surtout protestant jolie, était remarquable par sa bonne éducation et par ses sentiments élevés. Enfin, vers 6 heures du soir, j'étais encore sans lumière lorsqu'un dame entra et vint s'asseoir au pied de mon lit pour s'informer tout pas de ma santé. J'ai cherché à la rassurer et quand je lui ai renouvelé mes remerciements de toutes ses bontés, je ne suis pas Madame Bresson, me dit-elle. Je suis sa femme de chambre. Madame viendra dans une heure d'où, mais elle a appris que vous étiez souffrante et elle voulait avoir de vos nouvelles. Encore un témoin de plus, me disais-je en gémissant. So Lavalette is spending his first night hiding in this garret, and he can't sleep. He's so worried about everything, and he finally falls asleep at dawn. And then this little man comes in, and they were telling him they were even hiding him from the servants. And this man comes in, he says, "Oh, I'm here to clean your room," and they're letting me know. They let me in on the secret. So Levin's terrified. So he says, "Oh, please go in my room while I clean your room." And he's checking out this guy's room, and it's like, it's too nice. He's like looking in the wardrobe, and it's all his beautiful clothes, and there's like fresh flowers. So they treat their servants amazing there. And he's panicking, like, oh no, too many people know. And, he's in the Bureau of Foreign Affairs. He's going to get caught. He's terrified this whole time. And then he gets back in his room and he hears his name out the window. And he sits there for 4 hours waiting to hear what the news is about himself. And he hears that there's this huge manhunt going on and there's a bounty, and they're saying that anyone who hides him is going to really suffer. Anyway, that's a little summary of what. See, why should it be that way? It wouldn't be like that under Napoleon, that people would suffer for doing the right thing. I mean, Napoleon pardoned his assassins. He was actually too soft. That's a sad part, And they execute innocent people, and Napoleon wouldn't even execute his own assassins. I mean, what a difference, right? And then those people that he didn't execute kicked him out and took over, and those are the ones in charge at this point. So it's not always the best thing to be so nice. It's not good for everybody. He was too nice. But I understand why he didn't want to kill people. But then they killed him, and Napoleon always says this, that they killed him because he didn't, they were constantly sending assassins after him. These are murderers. And he didn't punish the murderers. And then they went to murder Lavalette. And Lavalette was Napoleon always said he was the most honest person that Napoleon knew. Napoleon had so much respect for Lavalette. Napoleon respected talent. He respected integrity. Under our regime, you do very well if you're very good at being a criminal, very good at lying. If you're willing to do the absolute wrong thing, that's how you shoot right to the top under this regime. So it's the complete opposite of the way Napoleon did things. He enforced the law, and under our system, the biggest criminals don't have to follow laws at all. But the good people who would do the right thing even without laws, they're the ones who get punished and restricted and put under house arrest. So everything is the absolute opposite when you're under English gold, secret society, puppet, foreign occupation rule. And they're not even the official government in England. They shouldn't even be in England doing this. And they most certainly shouldn't be a puppet running the United States. We're supposed to be a different kind of country than that. We're told that we're a sovereign nation. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Why don't we become one? See, we just have to change our minds and have different expectations and get together and demand that we become a sovereign nation. And then we pick our own leaders and then we stand behind that and we stand up for just law enforcement because, I mean, even the Napoleonic Code is a wonderful system of laws. So many of our laws are literally based on the Civil Code of Napoleon. That's certainly true of Louisiana. Um, those laws exist. We can just put them back into effect. We can enforce them. We can stand up for ourselves. We can, if it has to be the Wild West, so be it. Because that's how I live. I know I'm up against murderers. I'm ready to defend myself. If we all need to get into that mentality of we're all ready to defend ourselves, things are going to change. Because the people we're up against are very luxury loving, and they love their Epstein Islands, and they love their parties, and they love to eat well. They're not really the toughest people, and they're not the most courageous people because they've always had money to make everything happen for them. And actually, as wonderful as that has been for them, it's actually made them very fearful and weak. And those of us who have had to fight for everything, we're actually a lot tougher than they are in reality. So we are actually the strong ones. That's the interesting thing. Our adversities have made us stronger than they are. Because if they don't have money making everything wonderful happen for them constantly, then what? They didn't develop any skills. All they know how to do is pick up a phone and make demands and then send money. Okay, so they really can't do that much. And that's kind of what I've been showing. If you just stand up to them, you do very, very well because arrogance can only take them so far, and their money can only take them so far if they don't have that strength and integrity on their own. And since they're constantly lying, constantly playing tricks, you can just call them out, and they're like, they don't know what to do because they know they're lying. They know they're doing tricks. They know that they're committing treason. They know that they are the enemy within. In all of these countries, they know exactly that they're sneaking around and they're hiding who they are and they're pretending that they're not criminals. And I've been very careful not to mention names, but it's very easy to figure out who's behind Trump, who's behind the wars that never stop. It takes about a minute to figure it out. And so I feel I don't have to say any names because it's so obvious. So here, this is the story of how Napoleon was poisoned. It was proven in a laboratory in England. This is an uncontested fact that Napoleon is poisoned, whatever they want to tell you. Okay, this man, Sven Forveshood, proved it. He proves that Napoleon is poisoned, and every single thing that we have ever seen in all of the memoirs corroborate that he was poisoned. So let's continue in Spanish. Según Marchand, primer ayuda de cámara del emperador, Viesi capítulo 7. El gobernador Hudson habría dicho al doctor O'Meara, no quiero que muera de un ataque de apoplejía. Esto me colocaría en una situación muy embarazosa y también a mi gobierno. Prefiero que muera de una enfermedad lenta que nuestros médicos pueden certificar como natural. Una apoplejía se prestaría demasiado a los comentarios. Cuando O'Meara repitió esta conversación, el emperador contexto. En tal caso, resulta claro que si las instrucciones dadas al señor Lo no hicieran la orden escrita de matarme, la orden verbal sí ha sido dada. Además, Napoleón había sido advertido directamente de que Hudson Law ordía planes para abreviar los días de su prisionero, lo que se desprende del acta de un consejo de guerra celebrado en Santa Elena a finales de agosto. a principios de septiembre de 1819, en el que el doctor John Stoker fue acusado de no actuar de acuerdo con las instrucciones recibidas como médico de cabecera del emperador. Una de las faltas consistía en haber comunicado al general Bonaparte y a las personas de su seguimiento una infame calumnia difundida contra Sir Hudson Lowe por el doctor Barry O'Meara, ex médico del emperador. Esta calumnia era como si en el curso de una escala en la ascensión, O'Meara había afirmado públicamente que Hudson Lowe había efectuado en su presencia ciertas insinuaciones que tendían a la realización de un atentado contra la vida del emperador. El doctor Stoker había oído hablar de esta declaración de O'Meara y la había repetido en Longwood. De esta manera fue informado Napoleón. So you can tell Sven Forvished, the Swedish toxicologist, basically did what I've done. He went through the original source materials from St. Helena to find out what really happened there. If you go into these books about Napoleon, they add things most of the time. I haven't read all of them, so I can't say that. But the ones that I've looked at, they twist it in a certain way. But if you go to the books that were actually written by the people who were near Napoleon, you start to get a very accurate picture of what happened there. And he is referring to the memoirs that we did read. And these books are now available to everyone. If you go on the link that I put up with the recordings that I make here, and if you listen to those, you will find out the truth about a lot of things. So Sven Forvished is saying that the governor of St. Helena, Hudson Lowe, was saying to O'Meara, we don't want him to die of apoplexy. We don't want him to die in that way. We want it to be a slow death that we can call natural causes. Okay, that's the plan. Napoleon knows exactly what they're doing to him. Now, and then for 200 years, all of these agents were sent out to say Napoleon died of natural causes. Okay, so it shows you that we've been under the same dynasty for 200 years, maintaining the same lies. He was killed in a way to make it look like natural causes. Of course, it's obvious that they killed him. So they got to have their cake and eat it too. They got to scare everybody and terrorize them and show that unspeakable cruelty will happen to anyone who stands up for the people. And then they also got to say, oh, but we're completely innocent. We were wonderful to Napoleon. How wonderful for them, right? They get to terrorize people and then get away with it. And it just goes on and on for 200 years until the present day. And that is why I can't count how many agents have been running screaming after me about this. Okay, this is really important to the lie that they're telling us. They can't have us admiring populist heroes. They can't have us thinking that that's an okay outlook, because all we have to do is unite and enforce the law. All someone has to do is drive up to one of their palaces, because they do live in palaces, with some handcuffs, right? Can you imagine? Just imagine what that would be like if 5 bobbies, or whatever they're called in England, because they're in England. Maybe they're hiding now, but usually they're in England, okay? What if some of those wonderful police officers with the Masonic checkerboard on their hats That should be a little interesting tidbit for you. Maybe some of them won't be so dedicated to masonry that day, and they'll actually drive up to the palace and knock, knock, knock. Hi, we're here to see you with some handcuffs. Wouldn't that be amazing? See, if we all had that dream together, we could imagine what that would be like to actually have like 5 cop cars, whatever they call them in England, poppies, I guess. I don't know, but whatever. And then they just drive up to that palace and they say, you know what? We have a warrant for your arrest. We've had it with you people, what you've been doing to us. Because I'm not against England at all. I want England's freedom. I think England's a wonderful country, and this needs to end. So maybe some people could forget that they have checkerboards on their hats, and remember that they're actually human beings, and that we need that help. We need the law enforcement because we can't live under this regime anymore. We're not going to survive. They're very scared right now, and all of us are just such a threat to them. So they want us out of here as soon as possible. And I don't think, they're going to keep trying to get that World War III going. I've been watching them trying to light the spark on World War III. And I've talked about the astrology very much. It's World War III astrology since, you guessed it, early 2020. Early 2020, that was it. That was the perfect time to launch World War III astrologically. I talked about it, I predicted, I said they were going to do something. Early 2020, in January, there was a big alignment of planets. And by then, this is such a fascinating subject. My project's very spiritually guided, and I'm doing my best. But I had people coming to my house to intimidate me, and they were clearly from the government, from the cars that they were driving. And this was August 2019, and they were breaking things on my property, and they were driving around really slow, and they were walking around my house 2 in the morning with flashlights. They were letting me know that they were swarming my property in August 2019. And it was clearly government cars, and it was the weekend of a Trump fundraiser in my area, the Hamptons. You see, this all comes back to the Hamptons because that's where all the money is. This all goes back to money. So there's a big Trump fundraiser. And I guess they sent a couple of their Trump fundraiser people over to my house to scare me. Now, what was happening in August 2019? The person who invented the PCR diagnostic test, he died that month. Isn't that interesting? He seemed like a very healthy surfer. And I put his video up a lot. His name is Carrie Mullis. Look into him because he was a very truthful man. And I think he was a genius. And I think he's someone who's really worth listening to. So while they were sending all these government-looking cars to my house, this man lost his life. August 2019. Okay. So the feeling I got was they're coming to kill me. That's what they were saying. They were saying, we're coming to kill you. They were all over my property. So I put up cameras all over my house. And I already had, I started doing live streams. I just put all these live cameras up everywhere around me. And I knew that they were very serious and that they did want to kill me. So I became very cautious, and I stopped putting myself in a position where they could kill me. And at that time, I started to feel like I should learn astrology. It just seemed like a really wild idea. But I thought, okay, I'll look into astrology and find out if there's anything to it. Because by then, I was sure that English Gold believed in astrology, because I believed that they're occultists. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Just that there is hidden knowledge, and I think it can be used for good or ill. And I believe that they use it to hurt us and to always win. And I thought, well, they believe in astrology. Let's see if they're right. And I figured they would be right. Anyway, so all of fall, I was kind of staying home and trying not to get killed by these people that were intimidating me all over my house. Um, I learned astrology and did everything I possibly could to find out whether it was true or not. And I found that it actually was true. I was shocked. I really was. But I discovered that it was true. And what I learned that fall was that one of the biggest transits was coming up in January. And it was an alignment between the Sun, Pluto, and Saturn. And it was January 12th, 2020. So that fall, that's when they were planning this whole nightmare. And you can look it up. They were planning all the terrible things they did to us in 2020. They were planning that all that fall. And they sent those people to intimidate me. And oh, Carrie Willis just so happened to lose his life. So they were doing a lot of planning and intimidating. And they were getting all their secret society ducks in a row then. And what I was saying was they're going to do something in January. I said it all fall. I said they're going to do something in January. Why? Because I understood, I learned that that transit was such a Saturn and Pluto and the Sun. What does that mean? The Sun is prominence and fame. Pluto is like death and transformation. Saturn is restriction. It can be restriction. Okay, so you're looking at death and restriction in a big way. And I said that in the fall. I said, it's going to be something like that if astrology is real. So I was kind of testing the idea. And then that fall, I started to hear about corona, the sun. And then it was going to be this big death, and there was going to be restriction. And I was like, this is it. These people really are astrologers, and they really are scheduling their operations. It was a huge publicity campaign that was coordinated to work with a huge astrological transit, because this alignment was happening in Capricorn, which is the sign of Saturn. So that structures. Anyway, I was right, but it was terrible to be right. So I knew this was all nonsense. I knew this was all basically dark occultists doing terrible things to us. And you can go online, you can see that I was predicting this. And like I said, I didn't want to be right, but I was. Anyway, let's get into German. You can find out everything if you try. It's not hard. It's not hard. But these people are astrologers, and astrology is real, and you can use it to improve your life, and you can learn a lot about yourself. It's not a bad thing. It's a wonderful thing to know about. The planets really are affecting us. They try to make you think like it's charlatanry, but it's not. It's like the sun affects you, the moon affects you. Why don't the other planets affect you? They do. It's a mystery, but they do. Anyway, German. Freitag, dann 19. In der Feuer in dem Kamen des Saals aus, das aber erst bei Tageseinbruch zum Verschein kam. 2 Stunden später würde die ganze Niederlassung abgebrannt sein. Der Kaiser ging spazieren und mehrere von uns begleiteten ihn. Wir machten den Weg durch den Park zu Fuß. Unterwegs fiel ihm seine Schussschnalle ab und wir stürzten und gleichsam aufgedammt wurden, um sie wieder einzulegen. Der Schulste dabei war der glücklichste der Kaiser, der dies in den Tuilerien nicht gestattet haben würde, gab sich hier mit einer Art von Genugtuung hin. Er ließ uns gewähren und wir mussten ihm danken dafür, dass er uns seiner Handlung nicht beraubt
Kräfte, die uns in unseren eigenen Augen so ergereicht. Dieser Umstand erinnerte mich, dass ich noch nicht von unserem gewöhnlichen Benehmen um seine Person gesprochen habe. Und ich finde dies umso notwendiger, da wir mehrere Londoner Journale erhalten haben, welche diese Visi hunderttausend Albenheiten in Europa verbreiteten und behaupteten, die kaiserliche Etikette wäre in Longwood so streng wie in Tuilerien beobachtet zu werden. Der Kaiser war gegen uns der Beste und wahrhaftig vertraute Menschen wir von unserer Seite benahmen uns gegen ihn mit der größten Aufmerksamkeit, mit der tiefsten Beruhigung von Hofleuten. Wir suchten zu jeder Seite seine Wünsche zu erraten. Wir spähten alle seine Bedürfnisse aus. Er dürfte sich kaum rühren, so wären wir schon in voller Bewegung.
All right, that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it so much. Have a good evening.